I guess let's just kick it off with you.
Yeah.
This is your debut novel, so maybe tell us a little bit about how you got here and and a little synopsis about the book. I had hoped my physical copy would arrive so I could show
Mm,
everybody, but it's not here yet. So
I don't have one sitting right behind me. But I should have done that. But no, it's been a crazy kind of journey, but I think it's, like a lot of authors, it was not overnight by any stretch of the imagination. I've been writing for ages. I started writing when I was in middle school, like fanfic stuff. Wrote silly stories in crayon before that my mom has somewhere that I don't actually want to see. But I'm sure they're very bad. And the fanfic in middle school was also very bad. But I kept doing it all through high school, college, and then at some point, a friend was like, "Hey, write your own stuff." So I did. And it was a couple of years of querying, trying to get a literary agent, and then found my current agent. And then we went out in submission with my first book that didn't sell, but that's pretty normal. And it was pretty quick, so we knew within about a month that it wasn't going to sell. And I admittedly had a very bad day when we got like four passes all at once. But the next morning I woke up and I was like, well, I got to write a better book. And so the better book was Chase Me If You Can. So it went out on submission a couple months after that, and it ended up just really being like fortuitous because it went to editors about a month before Twisters came out. And so once Twisters came out, we were able to go back and be like, "Hey, you watching this movie? Did you like the movie? Because we got a book for you." And it sold in October so of 2024, and of course it just came out last week because publishing is publishing. But so it's been a wild ride. But the book itself is about Wes and Sloane. Sloane would tell you, because it's her point of view, that they don't like each other very much. Wes would have a different opinion. But they are storm chasers and photographers, and there is a magazine that's hosting a cover contest. It's a fancy, prestigious magazine, the sort that being on the cover could make or break your whole career. And so obviously they both want it. Wes, being Wes, does something a little foolish and gets himself in some trouble. And Sloane, being Sloane, refuses to win on a technicality. And so she says, "Get in, my car, my rules, but like, get in, let's go." And then they spend 6 weeks together in just one car. So it goes from there.
and I think when you mention Twisters, I'm sure a lot of people are like, "Oh, this is where the inspiration came from." But clearly this was conceptualized much before then. So where did you get the inspiration?
Probably my first chasing trip in 2019, because I remember sitting in the backseat of my friend's car and thinking, God, if two people are stuck in a car together like this, out in the middle of nowhere for, this period of time, and what if they didn't really like each other, but they kind of also maybe liked each other? And it was just kind of something that chugged along in the back of my mind. At the time I was writing historical romances. That was my first love in romance. Unfortunately, that market and traditional publishers are not getting along at the moment. So when I decided to pivot to contemporary in 2020, early 2022 is when I actually started writing that first one. But it came from my own experiences. I started storm chasing in 2019, and I've been doing it for the last 7 years. Pandemic, put a little bit of a halt on it, but I've been back out there the last couple of years, and it's just been so nice to be able to do again. So yeah.
Well, that was one of the things I was going to ask you about because I love so much that there is so much like chasing in this story, and I feel like as someone who has absolutely no awareness or experience in it, I was still able to learn a lot while really enjoying the fun parts of it too. So how much research did you have to do in addition to what you already know from your own experience?
It actually just kind of all lined up that I was, so you have to learn a lot of meteorology to do it safely. And I am not a science or math person. I thought about being a meteorologist when I was a kid, and then I took a class in high school. I was lucky enough that my high school had a meteorology class. Quickly discovered there was a lot of like calculus and no thank you. And so I kind of abandoned that idea and was like, well, maybe I'll find a way to go storm chasing one day anyway. And then ended up getting that opportunity in 2019 and started to dig into, okay, what do I need to learn so I can go out there and do this on my own and be safe. And so it kind of just lined up with the book where I was already spending time trying to learn the meteorology side of it, trying to learn how to read the weather models, trying to learn how to interpret the different language they use because, forecasting is not necessarily in plain English. And it just lined up because then I was writing the book at the same time. And in some ways, it made it kind of easier because I'm not the best at like let me sit down and read this very dry material. But I was motivated to do it for the book because I didn't want to get it wrong. So it kind of just worked out.
Two birds.
Two birds. Yeah.
Well, Sloan, she's a wedding photographer and she's been pretty independent her entire life, with people actually relying on her more than they probably should. At the same time, she has big dreams and maybe even bigger walls and fears. What was the most important aspect of her that you wanted to get right to tell this story?
I think it's the trying to show where her walls come from and why they're so high and why she's built them up so strong. Because, we exist in a time where the female main character being even a little bit unlikable sometimes is tough for some readers. And so I knew there was a chance that Sloane could come across unlikable because she's not super friendly in the beginning and she does have these pretty strong preconceived notions about who Wes is that without spoiling it, he is not who she thinks he is in the beginning and she's got to figure that out, but there's a reason that she is the way she is, and so I wanted to take the time to show what made her that way, how she has this family that has kind of abused her ability to hold everything together and has put her in a position where she has to be the parent because her mom is kind of a hot mess and her brothers are not the most helpful. And it was, it was also a lot of the conversations I think that we're having in general about eldest daughters and parentified children and daughters being expected to take on mom like roles, especially of younger brothers, and what that does to you as an adult and what that shapes, especially in romantic relationships. And, if you're responsible for having essentially your siblings as your children, what does that mean for you as an adult? And yeah, so it was a lot of that stuff kind of all rolled into one.
Well, she is appropriately, I think, cautious and measured, while Wes is reckless and spontaneous. I think you already mentioned his nickname is Wild Wes. So that gives you kind of an idea of his personality. What made you decide to explore these two opposing personality types and put them in such close proximity?
I think it's just I've always been fascinated by psychology in the sense of like what makes people who they are and what makes them behave the way that they do. And then taking that notion of two people who have been through similar trauma, if you will, and how does it shape them? And then how do they interact when they do have a similar background, but it has made them very different people? Because Sloane has a difficult family and it's made her very rigid and cautious and like I want everything in its neat little box. And Wes has a difficult family, and it has made him very like, well, I'm not going to take anything seriously, and I'm just going to have fun. And how does that collide, but then also find common ground in the end?
That was so interesting to me. I loved, and I didn't know if we wanted to get into that, but I loved how somewhat two sides of the same coin of like they have these very linear experiences that aren't the exact same, but like run the same parallel, and how I loved how you explored the way that it shaped either both of them like in their adulthood. So it was really fun for me.
I just like the notion of mirrors. So it's probably something that will show up in future books of how two people can be mirrors, but they don't realize it, or they have their own something going on where they're not able to see it. And then when it finally clicks, and they're like, "Oh, so we do actually have quite a lot in common." Hmm.
That could be a good thing or a bad thing.
Yes, that is true too.
So I love forced proximity. I know so many people love it. And while this one is kind of like chosen forced proximity, it is still forced proximity. So was that part of the story always a part of it, or did you add that in later?
I think it was always part of it because it was the how do you take two people who've been around each other for 10 years but never really gotten to know each other and like push them over. Like they have to spend a lot of time together, and Sloane wasn't going to do that without a good reason. And so when I was originally conceiving of the book, I thought to myself, well, what can I do to put these two together in a way that they kind of have to figure their stuff out? And sticking them in the same car was the natural solution. And Wes is reckless enough, and I have seen people get their windows smashed out, or friends of friends, or those sorts of things because they've been in places they should not be. So it just kind of all flowed together, and yeah.
I mean, we've already talked a lot about how Wes has this big personality. He's kind of flippant, happy-go-lucky, but we learn as we read that there is more to him, and he might not necessarily be just those things. Sloane, obviously, like you've said, wouldn't discover this unless they had to spend this time together. I'm curious to know, though, why you feel like at this time Wes decided to finally open up because he didn't have to. Like, he still could have just kind of let her think what she's always thought. So, why now?
He sees the opening because she starts to soften toward him. And some of that is, he's hurt. She's not a monster. So, he's bleeding on the side of the road. And she's just like, okay, well, let me, to her, like natural, almost motherling instinct kicks in the beginning because she's so used to having to care for these people in her life. And so she just kind of goes into like fix it mode. Like, okay, you're hurt. We got to fix this. This is what we're going to do. And so he starts to see an opening, whereas she is not just looking at him as, that idiot who is friends with my best friend's fiance. And so I have to put up with him. And because she softens that tiny bit toward him, he's like, oh, maybe I can do something with this.
There's a
And so
crack.
yeah, there's a crack. I'm gonna wedge my way in and see if that'll work for me. And so he does, and then he, wedges that crack a little wider, and eventually, finds his way in. So um it's for and he says something at one point to her about, well, it was the first time I thought you'd let me. And so that's why he makes the move that he does without spoiling that.
Well, I think that this book is just so fun. It's full of adventure, banter, wit, but as we've talked about, it does have heavier topics. Like, I mean, they are chasing storms, and storms are inherently just deadly and vicious. So, how did you approach like strategically weaving in these happy moments and hopeful moments while also acknowledging and respecting like the heavy magnitude of like some of the content?
It was more instinctive than anything, to be honest. It was a lot of just kind of playing with it and like what feels right. Some of it comes just from my own experiences because I know that feeling of both being super excited to see something cool, but then also being like, oh no, that's not a field. Oh God. And when you know enough about the storms and how to look at their tracks and where they're moving, and you're watching it get closer and closer to a town, and you're like, okay, please just die. Please don't do this. And unfortunately, it doesn't always die out, and it'll take out of town. It'll hit houses, and that's not good. That's not what you ever want. And there is a weird duality of being aware of that it's one thing when you're out in the middle of nothing and it's just field after field after field, and then everybody's excited and you get a cool looking tornado and you can take all the photos you want. But when it's going for a town, it's a whole different feeling. And so part of it was with this book, I wanted to capture some of what it's really like to do this. And Twister and Twisters are so fun and bonkers, and I love them for being fun and bonkers, but that's not a really accurate look at all of what it's like out there. And so for me, it was important because that's part of it is you do have to kind of live with the duality of like it's fun, but it's also a very bad day for somebody sometimes. So.
Well, kind of pivoting. I mean, that's a big one, but I want to pivot a little into Wes and Sloane and their chemistry. It's palpable. I don't know how she hasn't felt it before because it feels natural. The slow burn, I think, is really worth the wait without giving anything away. What would you say was the key to writing character chemistry and Why do you think it's important to include physical intimacy on the page?
I think they go hand in hand where like physical intimacy is when someone's their most vulnerable, right? Like physically, yes, you usually don't have your clothes on, but it's also, you're being driven by kind of the most basic of human instincts of hormones and feelings and everything else. And so it kind of strips you down to who you really are. And I think that there's something really interesting about how you can use those scenes. And yes, they're just fun too, but I think there's something really interesting about how you can use that scene to show who somebody is, what they really think of the person that they're with. Because if your guard is down and you're more just behaving down to the core of yourself, how is that going to be different from how you are when you have the chance to put your mask on and you're performing in a way. And so for that reason, I like to include those scenes to do heavy character work. And yeah, they're just fun too, but there's a lot of character work.
For sure. They're fun. Lots I mean, but I'm with you. Like you reveal so much about who you are in the way that you like interact with a partner, take care of them, think about them. So I found it just to be really really fun and revealing in more ways than one.
I love that. Yes, very revealing.
How did you choose to write one point of view versus multiple or I mean dual for this one?
Yeah. I think every story it's the story, right? So this one's single, my next one is dual, and it's about arcs and character development. So Chase Me If You Can, to me, is really Sloane's story. She's the one who's really going through something. And Wes has like a more minor arc, but most of his POV would be like, oh, Sloane's so pretty. I love her. I wish she would just give me a chance, which is fun in some ways, but to me is not narratively interesting as a writer. So for that reason, it was her POV. Whereas the next book, they're both kind of still figuring some things out, and so that one does have both characters' point of view. I will probably at some point do like some bonus scenes from Wes's point of view to throw in a newsletter or something when I have time. That I think would be just for fun, but for the book itself, it made sense to just keep it to Sloane because it's more her story.
Yeah. Well, can you tell us one of your favorite scenes to write, maybe without spoiling something?
No spoilers. There is, let's see. The photo shoot scene was fun because of both the the way that they're communicating with each other and the way that it shows how much has changed between them. And so it was fun for me to kind of think back about their early interactions, and I'm like trying to not spoil it. And then think about their interactions in that moment and how much has changed. So that was really fun. And then there's a moment with the audiobook that I just had so much fun with because in my own head I was like, what would happen if this happened and you were in the car with someone who, you know, you maybe were starting to feel some kind of way about, and what would that, yeah, I'm again trying not to do spoilers, but yeah, those two scenes.
That's exciting. It makes me want to go listen to the audiobook right now.
I still haven't listened to the whole thing. I haven't had time. I got through like an hour of it that I was just listening to when I was sitting at a gas station a couple weeks ago, but I haven't had time to go back to it. So at some point,
If readers could only take away one thing from this story, what would you want that to be?
the power and satisfaction of accepting yourself for who you are.
I love that. That's enough that you need to say.
Yeah, because I mean, that's the core of Sloane's story is that she's spent so long trying to be what everybody else expects her to be that she's kind of ignored being who she actually is, and that causes her problems. And it's, again, without spoiling things, it's only when she starts to be herself and pay attention to what she wants and what she needs that things start to change for her.
If you could give a piece of advice or would have liked to have received a piece of advice for writers or aspiring authors, what would you want that to be?
Find your voice. That was something that fanfic taught me. I mean, they say, do something for 10,000 hours and you'll become proficient at it. Fanfic got a lot of crap when I was younger. And it's funny that we talk about it now because when I was younger, it was very Fight Club. Like we don't talk about that. But now it's more in the mainstream, which I think is great because for me, it was such a training ground of finding my voice. Like, how do I want to construct stories? What do I want them to sound like? How to be in community with other writers and not just in competition, because I think that's something that is really valuable in this business. You know, other writers are not your competition, they're your colleagues. And somebody's going to get something you're not, you're going to get something that somebody else isn't, and that's all true. But I think there's so much value in being in community with other creatives because there are people who understand what you're going through in a way that nobody else ever will. They're sounding boards, they're friends, and there's so many reasons. And so for that, I would say, finding your voice, I guess finding your voice and your community are the two things that I would say, whether you do that through fanfic or online writing groups or in-person writing groups or whatever your thing is. Those two things to me have been invaluable. I would not be here without them.
Well, and you have hinted a little bit to this already, but what is your next step as an author?
I have a new book out next summer. So I've seen the cover sketch. It is the same artist as the first one, but the second one might be even better. So that's going to be very exciting. But the next one, there's a small excerpt from it in the back of Chase Me If You Can. So the title is Blow Me Away. And it is a meteorologist she's a broadcast meteorologist, and she is not real happy with her job. He is an actor who plays a meteorologist on a TV show that is more of a satire show. So his character really embodies like the worst parts of broadcasting. So she does not like him very much because she's made some assumptions based off of his character. And he gets himself in a little PR trouble. And so he gets sent out to chase storms for 2 weeks and talk about it on social media. And she gets sent to keep him alive. And then they decide that what happens in Tornado Alley will stay in Tornado Alley. And yeah, goes from there.
That sounds like so much fun. I can't wait. I can't wait to see the
So
cover.
it's been a lot of fun to write. So yeah, and doing dual POV, is something I've done before and just it didn't work for Chase Me If You Can, but it's been fun to go back to it. So that's been great for me too. So
Well, we don't want to rush away Chase Me If You Can because
no.
it's just now gotten here and it's so fantastic and everyone needs to go read it. So, thank you again for being here, for talking with us about, talking with me and everyone watching about Chase Me If You Can. I hope that you are able to just like get so much rest and kind of let it all wash over you and enjoy everything you've accomplished. This is amazing.
I have a weekend of nothing planned. I'm very much looking forward to my weekend of nothing. You may have seen the cats milling about in the background. I'm sure they're thrilled I'm home. I've only been home for 40 minutes, so they're still like, "Oh my God, you're back! Please don't leave again." But yeah, just gonna spend the weekend laying on the couch and getting some rest, and then it'll be time to get back to work. But for now, just trying to enjoy it all.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, you enjoy it and don't do anything. And
I will do
thank
my
you so
best.
much.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you, and thanks to everyone for watching. And maybe we can do this again for the next one. I'd love that.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. It's so the date's not final yet. That they won't finalize the date probably for another couple of months, but it should be June or July, so somewhere in there.
That sounds perfect. Well, you heard it here first. We'll do this again next year.
Sounds like a
All right,
plan.
have a great night. Bye,
Thank you too.
everyone.
Bye.